Tatooine is an out-of-the-way desolate desert planet deep in the Outer Rim. According to an ancient legend passed down by the Bomar monks, Tatooine was once covered by lush jungles. At this time, the planet was inhabited by a people called the Kumumgah, the ancient and original inhabitants of the planet. Virtually no evidence exists of the Kumumgah. Some legends say this is because the Rakata took the planet by force. The Bomar monks call this the legend of Lahan, Lahan being another name for Rakata Prime, the Rakata's home planet. It's unclear if something specific caused the ecosystem to drastically change, but the foliage died and the water dried up. Tatooine became the desert we know it as. Early colonizers originally mistook it as the third sun, as the sandy dunes are so reflective. Early settlers relied on mining efforts. Mining equipment was brought in and transported on massive metal vehicles propelled by treads. These massive vehicles could transport mass amounts of raw materials as well as refine them on board. They were originally called digger crawlers, but we all know them as sand crawlers. The mines of Tatooine were not as rich as the early miners thought. Many of the valuable minerals could be found on the planet's surface. The majority of the best materials were quickly shipped off-planet. The mining outposts and equipment were largely abandoned as the mining companies moved on. Two primary species are considered native inhabitants of Tatooine, the Jawas and the Sand People. The Jawas claimed the sand crawlers and started combing the vast deserts for abandoned equipment, failed settlements, and crashed ships. Jawas are furry humanoid creatures that are typically only about 1 meter tall. When a young Jawa would start walking, they were given robes that assisted in moisture regulation and insulated them from the planet's twin suns. The robes were hemmed high enough for young Jawa, and the hems would be let out as they grew. The amount of hems that were let out was how Jawas tracked their growth, with most making it to 5 or 6 hems. The Sand People are also a humanoid species with a size much closer to that of a human. These people were nomadic and considered primitive by the technological standards of most of the rest of the galaxy. Sand People were often hostile to Offworlders, and differing tribes would even battle each other. Nearly 100 years BBY, a group of Sand People assaulted the settlement of Fort Tusken. The name Tusken Raiders followed. Technically, only a single tribe were properly the Tusken Raiders, but the name was used for all Sand People. An earlier version of the Sand People that had settlements rather than living nomadically were deemed Gorfa. Another group, not native to the planet but having been present for a long time, was the Bomar Order. This order was a religious faction who believed removing physical sensations would enhance the power of their minds. The highest level of this effort was in removing their brain and having it placed in a nutrient-filled jar where it could survive. The jars would be attached to robotic spider bodies to be transported. The monastery they built on Tatooine would eventually be taken over by the crime lord Jabba the Hutt. Jabba liked the morbid look of the traveling brains, and the spider droids never bothered any of his plans, so he let them stay. The relatively few Offworlders who decided to stay managed to turn tiny settlements into at least a few cities. Some settlers lived outside the city limits where moisture farming and hydroponic gardening were the primary occupations. Mos Espa and Mos Eisley grew to be fairly sizable cities due to their spaceports. The majority of the wealth that grew these cities came from gambling and trade. Trade could be legal, but far too often was black market dealings. The worst of the illegal activities on Tatooine was in the slave trade. Why do so many massive galaxy-impacting events occur on this desolate planet? There's no official in-universe explanation, but I have a strong theory. Early in Earth's 20th century, the concept of ley lines was explored. These are straight lines drawn between historic structures, prehistoric sites, and natural landmarks. The idea is that ancient civilizations were aware of them and intentionally built structures along the lines. Ley lines are said to exude Earth energies and serve as guides for extraterrestrial spacecraft. My theory is that the Star Wars galaxy has its own version of ley lines. The Force is an energy field that spans the entire galaxy. The cosmic force transcends space and time and is connected to destiny. It's logical to assume that the cosmic force could use a place, such as Tatooine, to host major events for the sentient beings of the living force. The symbiotic relationship between the living and the cosmic force dictates nothing in the galaxy occurs by accident. The lines and paths that make up the world between worlds could be a physical manifestation of these destiny-determining lines. Check out this transmission next for more information on important planets in the Star Wars universe.